Welcome back to Cool City Express this lovely morning, and this is our home run segment. And like I said earlier on, we have a double barrel package for you this morning. And the first part, we have dealt with it. Now we're going straight to the very next one, and we turn our attention to a subject that lies at the heart of every peaceful, progressive, and prosperous society. Now, across our communities, we are witnessing growing concerns about declining moral values, intolerance, violence, disrespect for human dignity, and a weakening sense of responsibility to one another. Yet, every great society is built not only on laws and institutions, but also on the character, conscience, and compassion of its people. So, how do we raise a generation that values integrity over shortcuts, respect over hostility, and empathy over indifference? What roles do families, schools, religious institutions, government, and each of us play in shaping a more humane society? Now, these are the important questions we'll be exploring with our guest in this segment of the program as we discuss building a culture of conscience, respect, and humane conduct in our society. I'm joined this morning by Lady Jane Kalu Ndukwe. She is of the Etiquette and Social Values Organization. It is an NGO. Good morning to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Bonnie.
Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. Okay, so let's start this way. How would you rate the Nigerian society currently, as regards having a culture of conscience, respect, and human conduct?
Ooh, what a question. Well, if I must be honest, quite low, and it's
1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 10, maybe 2.
That's pretty low.
Very low,
Okay.
very low, because it's actually very frightening. When you open social media, especially Facebook these days, it's so charged up, with violence, with all manner of frightening stories, coming from homes, from institutions, schools. It's frightening. Yeah, it's frightening.
So you rated 1.
No, I said 2
over 10.
Yes, I said 2 over 10. Yes.
Over 10. So many people are believing, or rather believe, that our society is experiencing this decline in moral values due to a number of factors. So from your own perspective, what are some of the factors you think are responsible for this decline in our conscience as a nation?
In our conscience, quite a number of things. One may just want to peg it on hunger. Hunger breeds desperation. So when people are hungry and they cannot feed themselves, they cannot provide for themselves, they begin to cut corners, because they need to survive. Then there's also the area of not being taught, because when you only focus on results, there's a lot of competition. Everybody wants to achieve results, but you don't look at the value that you're putting into the persons, or even how you value the persons achieving these results. So when you disregard human dignity and all you're just focused on is results, so people just want to do what they can to produce those results, and then they cut corners, they play down on values. So, but when people begin to recognize the importance of values, then you have people who work out of conviction. So when you work out of conviction, you produce something that is lasting, that is wholesome, that can actually transform your society. So there are many ways to look at what is actually happening. You can look at it from the family angle, where maybe some parents, fail to do the needful, to focus on values, and they're looking at money, and then you see some that are pointing to other people's children. Oh, if they could do this, why not you?
Yeah.
So, and when you have parents that speak in that manner, they're only encouraging you to do crazy things, silly things, just to make money. So, and then when you look at it from the religious angle, there's been a play down on moral consciousness. Everybody is talking about prosperity, and if you bring money and donate, nobody cares where the money is coming from. So people now act anyhow, to be able to just bring this money. Then if you look at it from the school perspective, they focus more on academics, pass, anyhow pass, and then we know some institutions that cut corners just to ensure that students pass.
And so they attract more students,
Exactly.
to enroll in their institutions.
Exactly.
And all that. But you said it's hunger. I listened to your analysis. You talked about the church. You talked about public institutions and all that. I'd rather say it's greed, much more than hunger. Why I say so is I read a tweet yesterday where someone was talking about Nigeria being gone, that every single public institution that you would like to probably engage with, either as a staff or you need their services, that you must give kickback. And it reminds me of what happened recently with the NSCDC, that Ministry of Interior recruitment into the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. This is a personal experience. I have a close relative who sat for the exam, and they were given different dates for the exams. The first day, it was online, it was virtual, so if you finished your exam, you will see your score right on the screen there. Then you will know whether you passed or whether you did not pass. But somehow, the next day, they stopped displaying your results at the end of the examination. So you wouldn't know whether you passed or if you didn't pass, thereby creating room for you to go ask an insider to find your score for you. And probably they will tell you that you didn't pass, but you need to bring some kickbacks and all that. And for this close relative, she was asked to bring 2.5 million naira to get engaged. This is not the first time we're hearing such amount of money for NSCDC, the Nigerian Immigration Service, the Nigerian Customs Service, and all that. So I'm looking at the bosses who receive this money and their level of earning and income. They are no longer hungry, you understand, but they still ask for this money. You mentioned the clergy. Most clergy live large in Nigeria today. They are still fleecing poor Nigerians with promises of God blessing them if they bring more money into the coffers of the church, as if God is a money doubler and all that, and go through all the facets of society. So do you want to change your mind about it being hunger or it being greed?
Both, because there's an element of hunger, where you see the ones that are hungry and they're desperate. So they do things just to make that money, to survive. We have that segment. Then we have the segment greed, and most especially those in higher positions. They come under the segment of greed, and the money is never enough. And then they milk off people who are just trying to survive, and so it's a terrible situation in this country. Well, I want to say maybe world over, but I'm looking at Nigeria because that is where I live and that is where I come from, So it's a terrible situation. It's not just in those places that you mentioned, even in the schools, So there are schools who they know you have passed, but they won't give you admission until you pay money to get something that is rightfully your due. So the rottenness is so much in this country. It's a terrible situation that we're dealing with. Values have been eroded, and we can't progress properly if we do not restore those values, And people think about leadership as just a role, But leadership is actually service. Who are you making better? Are you making the system better? All these microwaved actions that we do, nobody listens, nobody cares. You don't even see the people that are working with you. You don't even want to better them. You don't even want to empower them. So all you're doing is just moving at a fast pace that is going nowhere. Because without conscience, you make decisions that are not for the good of all. Without conscience, without respect for human dignity, you step on people, and the other one, humane conduct. I mean, it's so broad, where can we, it touches every facet.
Now that you mentioned leadership, let me ask this question. There are different areas that leadership coming: political leadership, religious leadership, and all. In fact, as a matter of fact, every society is built on these two mainly: political leadership and religious leadership, because either you are obeying country or you're obeying God, or even both at some point. Now we see political leaders living so ostentatiously. Recently, a video surfaced of a senator in Ebonyi State, a first-term senator. He was a former local government chairman of his local government, Eza North local government, and then he's a first-term senator, and he's about to open it's not a mansion, I think it's a castle in his locality, and then you ask, how much is the take home of a senator? So as a public personality, as a leader of a political sphere, should he live that ostentatiously? We see Nyesom Wike driving 2 Rolls Royces, a federal minister of the FCT driving 2 Rolls Royces as part of his convoy, armored Rolls Royces as a matter of fact. The kind of thing we only saw with Queen Elizabeth, the monarchs of the UK and all that. We now see an appointee of a president, driving that sort of car. We see religious leaders also drive Rolls Royces, and all that. And you juxtapose it with the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Bible. That's when I say religious leaders. Now I'm talking about Christian leaders, because I am a Christian. I don't know how Muslims do theirs in the north, and this is a Christian-dominated part of the country. So, how can we begin to reverse these things in leadership, the ostentation in leadership? Because for me, it's lack of conscience for a pastor to tell you to fast and pray for God to change your financial situation, and he's expecting you to also bring the mega income you have to him, and then he's living extremely large. He can help you out, but he decides to ask you to depend on God to help you out while you are helping him out, the other way around. And then for the political leadership as well, Nyesom Wike is a salary earner as far as I'm concerned, just like I am a federal civil servant and I earn salary. Why should he own 2 Rolls Royces, and why should he show it off like that? How do we begin to reverse these things in leadership? Because younger people are beginning to think, when I get there, this is how I'm going to do mine, or even worse.
The word is accountability. Accountability, The minute we begin to hold our leaders accountable, changes will begin to start. But we don't as a people. The other day I was saying to someone, everything is turned into a joke. And then somebody else said maybe that is a coping mechanism for Nigerians, because you would find that in some other African countries, they will revolt, they would protest, and they would get things done. But unfortunately, in our own society, we would crack jokes, we would post all sorts of things on social media, and then that ends it. And then the next person is saying, well, if they're doing this, I'm going in to go and get my own.
If you don't beat them,
you know,
join
if
them.
you join them, you know. So it's a vicious circle, you know. And then the thing, like I was speaking with somebody yesterday, and she said, it's you deciding to stand for values in where you are. Because you cannot change everybody. You cannot, you know, because people will decide what they want to do based on their maturity and their level of consciousness, you know. So if you decide to make good where you are, it may just rub off on one or two other persons who may decide to make good where they are, like a chain reaction, you know. So, but when you come out, for instance, if I come out and begin to scream, no, why must they ride Rolls Royce? Why must they do this? Somebody in that crowd will tell me to shut up. You know, if it is paining you, that's what they'll say. If it is, go ride your own. And more people will toe that path. So then how do we change the system? And then the next thing is that because they are getting something from somebody else, you know, so then they can't speak up. You know, so if somebody comes, gives you bag of rice, gives you this, gives you that, you won't even have the should I say, moral justification to say, you're not doing well. I don't want your rice, you know.
Okay, so we must begin to change individually. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
And you must begin to influence positive values on people within your
within your sphere.
space.
Yes, exactly.
And all that.
Exactly.
Because you cannot change
everybody
at the same time. So it's more like the slogan we used to have in the Ministry of Information. I think it was during the Dora Akunyili era, where they say change begins with me. You know, so if you don't give bribe, then the next person around you will not see bribe to collect.
Exactly.
And all that. And for our schools, you know, what do we do with them at that stage of you know, learning? Because we are still molding young people. What can we do, you know, to catch young people young enough so that they will not get into the system fully integrated into this conscienceless system and extreme greed that we experience today?
When you see a child do something wrong, call it out. You know, don't condone it. And one other thing that happens is, if it is the child of, in quotes, maybe a poor person, then you want to beat the person, and you know. Then if it is the child of some influential person, you leave the person. So that kind of favoritism, you know, sends wrong signals. So if we really want to change the system from the school level, call out what is wrong. If a child takes what does not belong to him, tell him it is wrong. You know, don't, as a teacher, sit back and say, oh, please go away. When somebody comes to report, he took my pencil, and then you say, oh, please don't disturb me. That "don't disturb me" has already given the child that took the pencil the impetus to do more.
Yeah.
You know, so we really, it's work that we have to do consciously if we want our society to change.
Well, we must thank you very much, Lady Jane Kalu Ndukwe, from the Educate and Social Values Organization and NGO. Thank you very much for being part of our conversation this morning. We hope to see more of you, because we need such conversations very, very often. We are at an all-time low in Nigeria. I am bothered about it. You know, my other brother will say why he lives outside of Nigeria is not because he didn't have anything economically viable to do here, but just because he needs his sanity, that he can exist in a space where everybody seems to be mad.
And safety too. And safety.
Of course.
Because if people are so mad doing things that are not right, the place is no longer safe.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
You're
for having us
welcome.
on the program this
Thank
morning. This
you.
is where we call it wraps on this Tuesday's edition of Cool City Express. The producer has been Emenike Eze and Chidebere Agokwe. My name is Von Wadokwe. You have yourself a very splendid Tuesday. Good morning to you.